Neither of these stories, which are two more nails in the coffin of EVs and will have the zealots crying into their soy lattes, should come as any surprise if you're a regular follower of this channel. But they will no doubt come as a shock to anyone who has relied on the mainstream media for their information about the great EV transition, which has portrayed battery cars as a simple drop-in replacement for combustion cars with all upside and no downside. This rose-tinted view of EVs couldn't be further from the truth. Two articles today show just how far EVs are from being even barely comparable to the practicality and convenience of combustion cars, let alone anywhere near exceeding them. An article from the Times of London reveals how claimed charging speeds that are at the core of the big push to make refuelling as quick as regular cars are almost always well short of theoretical maxima which the manufacturers brag about on their websites. And then an article from Australia reveals that when you finally got the thing charged, the range is less than promised as well. Brilliant. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer turned Sydney YouTuber. Unlike the pro-EV channels which are propped up by governments and vested interests, this channel has no big oil sponsorships. So if you value my work and you'd like to help keep the channel going, please consider hopping over to my store where you can purchase some cool anti-EV merch, or alternatively, why not buy me a coffee? Click the links in the description or scan the QR codes on screen. Thank you so much. If you've been paying attention, you will have heard of the charging conundrum, the name I give to the immutable physical relationship between the size of an EV battery, the power of an EV charger, and the length of time it takes to charge. The time taken to charge the battery is simply the size of the battery in kilowatt hours divided by the charger power in kilowatts. If you have a battery with a capacity of 60 kilowatt hours and a charger with a power of, let's say to make it simple, 60 kilowatts, it will take 1 hour to charge. If you want to charge that battery in 30 minutes, you'll need double, 120 kilowatts, and in 15 minutes, 4 times, 240 kilowatts. But both chargers and the cars themselves are rated by their maximum theoretical charging power. And real-world conditions almost invariably mean that both the chargers and the cars are incapable of charging at the speeds claimed. In the case of the charger, it will frequently be throttled by the capacity of the connection to the grid, which might have to be split between multiple cars. Yes, your charger might be able to put out 100 kilowatts maximum, but if the grid connection is only 100 kilowatts and there are 2 cars charging, you ain't getting 100 kilowatts. You're getting 50 kilowatts maximum, and probably less than that, and it will take you twice as long to charge. And a real-world test in the UK has demonstrated this to be the case. Most best-selling EVs barely ever reach peak charging speed. A test of 10 electric cars, including Porsche Taycan and Tesla Model Y, reveals the majority charge slower than advertised, causing waits at charging stations. The majority of best-selling EVs barely ever achieve their maximum charging speed, creating longer waits at charging stations. The Porsche Taycan is the fastest charging electric car, while the Peugeot E3008 is the slowest, a test of the 10 most popular models found. EV manufacturers typically quote peak charging powers of 150 kilowatts, 250 kilowatts, or even 320 kilowatts, but questions have long been raised about how accurate the figures are. We wanted to answer a simple question every EV driver asks at some point. Why is my car not charging as fast as it should? Said Paul Barker, the editor at Auto Express, which carried out the test. This test shows the answer is far more complicated than just blaming the charger. The 10 cars were connected to a 350 kilowatt capable ultra-fast charger under controlled conditions at GridServe's electric forecourt in Braintree, Essex. Each car was charged from a similar starting level, about 10 to 15% battery, in ambient temperatures of 13 to 14 degrees C and with no battery preconditioning, which involves warming or cooling the battery before charging to bring it to its optimal operating temperature. Barker said the setup simulated the kind of public charging session many drivers experience day to day. The testers then examined how long it took to add 60% of charge and the average charging speed during this period. Just two of the cars, the Ford Capri and the Volkswagen ID.7 Tourer GTX, achieved their claimed peak charging power during the test. The Peugeot E3008, Tesla Model Y, and Citroën EC3 all struggled, falling short of their advertised peak speeds and taking half an hour or more to reach 60% charge. The Porsche Taycan, which is advertised as having a peak of 320 kilowatts, reached 282 kilowatts but added 60% of charge in only 15 minutes. The Tesla Model Y had the biggest shortfall. It claims to have a peak of 250 kilowatts but only managed to reach 145 kilowatts and was the second slowest to add 60%, taking 30 minutes. Tesla said the car did not reach its advertised peak because the car's battery had not been preconditioned before charging. The slowest at 38 minutes was the Peugeot E3008, which advertised 160 kilowatts but achieved 13 kilowatts. Note Tesla's excuse there: you didn't precondition the battery. That's because charging these batteries is so incredibly sensitive to external factors like temperature that you have to warm the battery up in cold climates or conversely cool it down in hot climates before you find that very narrow Goldilocks zone where you at least have a chance of reaching maximum charging speeds. And the irony of this is that the heating or cooling of the battery wastes yet more energy from the very same battery you are trying to charge up, which I always think is completely hilarious. And in a display of astonishing ignorance about the car market in the UK, the EV industry coughs and splutters to try and find an excuse for the problem. Industry experts said most EV drivers do the majority of charging at home overnight using domestic supplies. Dan Caesar, the chief executive of Electric Vehicles UK, the trade body, said, "If you're one of the minority of us that can't charge at home and drive significant distances per annum, the speed at which your car can charge might matter more, and you might need to do a little research, as not all charging experiences are the same." Yeah, right, mate. If you believe that in 2030, when everyone is supposed to be buying EVs, that those who can't charge off-street overnight are in the minority, you've either never left your privileged inner city existence or you haven't got your head screwed on straight. It has to be one or the other. He does, however, admit another problem with EV charging, and that is that once you're above 80% full, your charging speed will decrease even further, which I also find hilarious. It would be like saying, "Oh, you can't fill up your fuel tank more than 80% unless you dribble the petrol in really slowly." Yet EV drivers are prepared to put up with this, the idiots. And in Australia, we find that the other side of the equation, range, is similarly based on fantasy, not reality, which goes to show that EV zealots squawking that range anxiety is a thing of the past are more delusional than even I thought possible. That's because the quoted figures for range are based on almost ridiculously perfect conditions. No hills, no wind, nice balmy temperature, no heater or air conditioning turned on, lights all off, no seat heaters. All things which you'd have to deal with in a real-world situation. Real-world EV test reveals brands like Tesla and Kia fall short on battery range. Road tests reveal the true distance range of Australia's most popular electric vehicles. Here are the 5 models which failed to go the advertised kilometres. Electric vehicle brands are falling short of their advertised ranges on a single battery charge, with real-world testing of BYD, Tesla, Kia and Smart EV models revealing the performance of a Chinese-manufactured car was 23% below its promoted road distance. The first independent Australian testing of electric vehicle ranges, conducted by the nation's peak motoring body, found 5 popular EV models all fell below their advertised on-road performance. Commonwealth-funded EV road tests conducted by the Australian Automobile Association showed the Chinese-made 2023 BYD Atto 3 boasted the largest variation, with a range of 369 kilometres recorded on a single charge in real driving conditions, compared with its promoted 480 kilometres calculated in laboratory tests. Testing data compiled by the AAA, which represents state motoring bodies including RACQ, NRMA, RACV and RAC, showed the popular 2024 Tesla Model 3 performed 14% below its advertised driving range, recording a real-world range of 441 kilometers on full charge compared with its lab range of 513 kilometers. Two of the country's more popular EVs, the 2024 Tesla Model Y and 2022 Kia EV6, recorded range variations of 8% below their advertised distances on a single battery charge. The Tesla Model Y real-world range was 490 kilometers compared with its advertised 533 kilometers, while the Kia EV6 travelled 484 kilometers compared with its lab range of 528 kilometers. The worst performer was the BYD Atto 3, which fell 23% short in real-world tests, managing to cover only 369 kilometers instead of the lab range of 480 kilometers. The best performer was the 2024 Smart Hash 3 model, which came in at 5% or 23 kilometers less than its lab-tested range of 455 kilometers. And of course, in Australia, which is freaking huge, this could mean you end up stuck in the back of Beyond when your battery runs out. If you were in a regular car, you might be lucky and a local farmer might carry a jerry can of diesel or petrol in the back of his ute to help you out. But funnily enough, that same farmer is unlikely to carry a jerry can full of electricity for your silly milk float. The lab tests indicated that a BYD Atto 3 being driven from Melbourne to Adelaide would cross the South Australian border, just reaching Wirraga on a full charge. But the real-world tests found the Atto 3 would run out of charge before getting to the Victorian town of Nil. Should be called Nil Battery. Similarly, the Tesla 3 on a trip from Sydney to Melbourne would get to Holbrook and almost Mulungandra on a full charge under the lab tests, but the real-world test indicated the car would make it to Tarcutta but run out of charge before the Kiamba turnoff. Well, none of this matters to normal people who buy combustion cars, because even if you do get low on gas, you know you can fill up in 5 minutes and be on your way, all set to cover another 1,000 kilometers without stopping. But when the pain you have to suffer in an EV when you do run out of charge is so significant, i.e. a long wait at a charging station, then range becomes so much more important. This kind of nonsense makes me realise just how ridiculous the whole push for EVs really is, and how people are simply expected to suffer these kind of inconveniences in order for Australia to reach its nonsensical net zero goals. And after all that, if we do eventually reach net zero, we'll live in a land of rainbows and unicorns where bad weather never happens again, right? Nope, the climate won't even notice, and the weather will be exactly the same. We'll still get bushfires, floods, hailstorms and gale force winds. Nothing will have changed, but we'll have wasted billions if not trillions of dollars just to make life harder and more miserable than it is now, if that's even possible. Thanks very much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any tips or stories, go there. If you'd like to watch another video, go there. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, go there. And please subscribe to the channel.